I was working at a tech museum in Berlin when an American family walked up to the telephone display. The dad pointed at the old rotary phone and told his kids, "See? This is what Alexander Graham Bell invented in America." I had to step in. "Actually, sir, Bell was Scottish-Canadian, and he filed his patent in Boston, but similar devices were being developed in Germany and Italy at the same time." He looked at me like I'd just told him the moon landing was fake. No, Bell was American. He invented the phone in America." I showed him the museum placard. It clearly stated Bell immigrated to America, and the invention had multiple contributors worldwide. He walked away muttering something about European museums spreading lies. This is the kind of context I share regularly. Global, grounded and built for people who want more than the textbook version of history. My colleague in Rome had a similar moment. She was giving a tour when an American tourist interrupted her explanation of ancient Roman concrete. "Why are you talking about this old stuff? Modern concrete was invented in America in the 1800s. She patiently explained that Roman concrete was so advanced. Some of their structures have lasted over 2,000 years, longer than most modern buildings. The tourist wasn't having it. "Yeah, but the good concrete, the kind we use now, that's American." She showed him the Pantheon Dome, poured in 125 AD, still standing, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. He took a photo and moved on, unconvinced. Then there was the pizzeria incident in Naples. I watched a group of Americans argue with the owner about pizza. One of them insisted pizza was really perfected in New York. That's where it became what it is today. The owner, whose family had been making pizza for 4 generations, just smiled. Pizza Margherita was created here in 1889 for Queen Margherita. New York pizza is good, yes, but it's American pizza, not Italian pizza. Different thing. The tourist doubled down. But nobody knew about pizza until it came to America and got popular. The owner stopped smiling. Napoli has been making pizza since the 1700s. We were a kingdom. We had queens. We had pizza. The Americans left a $3 tip on a €60 bill and walked out talking about how Italians don't understand their own food history. These aren't isolated incidents. There's a pattern here, and it's fascinating. Americans have this interesting relationship with inventions, innovations, and cultural contributions. It's not malicious. It's not stupidity. It's something much more interesting, something that reveals how education, media, and national identity shape what we believe about the world. Working at a science museum in London taught me something important. Americans aren't lying when they claim inventions. They genuinely believe what they're saying because that's what they were taught. I had an American student visit during a school exchange program. Smart kid, polite, genuinely curious. We were looking at the World Wide Web exhibit, and he said, "It's cool that America shared this technology with the world." I asked him what he meant. "Well, the internet was invented in America, right? So it's generous that we let everyone use it." I explained that the internet and the World Wide Web are different things. The internet's predecessor, ARPANET, was indeed American military research. But the World Wide Web, the thing that made the internet usable for regular people, was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, a British scientist working at CERN in Switzerland in 1989. He was shocked. Not defensive, just genuinely surprised. "We learned in school that America invented the internet." I told him that's technically partially true, but it's incomplete. The global internet we use today is built on contributions from dozens of countries. Packet switching was conceptualized by Paul Baran in America and Donald Davies in Britain independently. Email protocols, domain name systems, fiber optics all had international contributors. He pulled out his phone and started Googling right there in the museum. Why didn't anyone tell us this? That's the question that matters. Why doesn't anyone tell them? A teacher from Chicago visited our museum and gave me the answer. She was wonderful, open-minded, asked great questions. We got talking about curriculum, and she explained that American history textbooks are designed to build national pride. They emphasize American achievements, sometimes at the expense of full context. It's not a conspiracy. It's pedagogical choice. The idea is that students need to feel proud of their country's contributions before they can appreciate the complexity of global history. The problem is that many students never get that second part. They graduate believing the simplified version. Another time, I was at a conference in Amsterdam. An American inventor was presenting his new phone app. During the Q&A, someone asked about the algorithm he was using. He said, "It's based on Boolean logic, which is fundamental to all computing." A Dutch attendee raised his hand. "You know George Boole was Irish, working in England, right?" The American presenter paused. "I thought Boolean logic was named after an American mathematician." The room went quiet. Someone Googled it. George Boole, Irish, 1815–1864, created Boolean algebra in Cork, Ireland. The presenter handled it well, laughed it off, said he'd learned something new. But you could see it bothered him. His whole presentation was built around American innovation leadership. I saw the same thing at a film festival in France. An American documentary filmmaker was talking about cinema history. She mentioned that America invented Hollywood and basically created the film industry as we know it. A French film professor in the audience politely interrupted. The Lumiere brothers held the first public film screening in Paris in 1895. Georges Méliès was making special effects films in France before Hollywood existed. Hollywood became dominant, yes, but it didn't invent cinema. The filmmaker admitted she didn't know that. In film school, we basically start with Edison and then jump to Hollywood. Everything before that is treated as prehistory. That phrase stuck with me. Prehistory. As if the world didn't exist before America arrived. But here's what makes this fascinating rather than frustrating. When you actually explain the full story to Americans, most of them are interested. They want to know. The issue isn't arrogance, it's gaps in education. I met an American engineer in Munich who was visiting the Deutsches Museum. He was looking at the automobile exhibit, and we started chatting. He mentioned how Henry Ford revolutionized car manufacturing. I agreed. Ford's assembly line innovation was huge. But I pointed out that Carl Benz invented the first practical automobile in Germany in 1885. Ford made cars affordable and scalable, but he didn't invent the car itself. The engineer nodded slowly. That makes sense. Ford improved the process, but someone had to make the first one. Then he asked me a great question. Why do Americans always think we invented stuff first when we usually just made it better or more popular? That's the real insight. America's genius wasn't usually inventing things from scratch. It was taking existing inventions and scaling them, marketing them, making them accessible. That's not less important. It's differently important. But somewhere in the education system, we made it successful became, we invented it. A historian from Boston told me this is partly because American history is so short compared to European or Asian history. When your country is only 250 years old, you don't have ancient Rome or the Renaissance to point to. So the historical narrative focuses intensely on American contributions, sometimes inflating them to fill the space that older nations fill with millennia of history. It's not about being better or worse. It's about how national identity gets constructed through education. And when that construction isn't balanced with global context, you get Americans in Germany arguing that they invented the telephone, or Americans in Italy explaining how they perfected pizza, or Americans in England surprised to learn the World Wide Web came from a British scientist. The fascinating part is what happens when you explain this gently, with examples and evidence. Most Americans respond with curiosity, not defensiveness. They start asking questions. They want to know the real story. That gives me hope. If this kind of reframing resonates with you, honest, international, and insight first, you'll want to stay connected. My friend works at a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland. She told me about a meeting where an American partner kept referring to aspirin as an American innovation that saved lives worldwide. She finally had to correct him. Aspirin was synthesized by Bayer in Germany in 1897. It became popular in America, yes, but it's a German invention. The American looked confused. But America has all the big pharmaceutical companies. She nodded. Now, yes, but pharmaceutical science has contributions from Germany, Switzerland, Britain, France, everywhere. Penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming in Scotland. Insulin was isolated in Canada. Vaccines came from Edward Jenner in England. The American sat back in his chair. I had no idea. And that's the thing. He genuinely had no idea, because American brands became so dominant globally that they erased the origin stories in people's minds. This is what I call the marketing problem. America became so good at branding and marketing that they accidentally convinced themselves they invented the things they were selling. I saw this at a food expo in Paris. An American company was promoting their American-style hamburger. A German attendee pointed out that the hamburger is named after Hamburg, Germany. The American representative said, "Yeah, but the modern hamburger, with the bun and the fixings, that's American." The German agreed. The preparation style is American, but the concept of ground meat patties was already in Hamburg. You popularized it, didn't make it from nothing. The American thought about this. So we took something that existed and made it famous? The German smiled. Exactly. That's actually more impressive than inventing it. You made the whole world want it. That reframing is important. Making something popular worldwide is its own kind of genius. But it's not the same as inventing it. A friend who teaches at a university in Canada told me about an American student who was shocked to learn that basketball was invented by a Canadian. Wait, James Naismith was Canadian? The student was genuinely surprised. But basketball is America's sport. My friend explained that Naismith invented the game in Massachusetts while working at a YMCA, but he was born and raised in Canada. The sport became associated with America because that's where it grew popular and professional. The student said something that stuck with me. I guess we're good at taking things and making them ours. That's not entirely wrong. America's cultural influence is so powerful that it absorbs things and rebrands them as American. Blue jeans were invented by Levi Strauss, a German immigrant, using denim fabric from Nimes, France. But jeans became the symbol of American culture. Rock and roll was built on blues and country, which came from African American and European folk traditions. But rock became American music. Even American English absorbed words from dozens of languages, creating something new that feels uniquely American. I was at a tech conference in Seoul when an American presenter talked about how Silicon Valley invented the tech startup culture. A Korean developer raised his hand. Samsung was founded in 1938. Sony was founded in 1946. Tech innovation was happening in Asia, while America was still mostly agriculture-focused in the West. The American presenter backtracked. I meant the modern venture capital model. The Korean nodded. That's more accurate. America created the funding ecosystem that scaled tech companies. But innovation itself was global. This distinction matters. America didn't invent technology, but America created systems that funded, scaled, and marketed technology better than anyone else. That's a real achievement. It doesn't need to be inflated into something it's not. A museum curator in Athens told me about an American tourist who asked why ancient Greeks didn't have democracy like America. The curator had to explain that democracy was literally invented in ancient Athens. America adapted it, added a constitution, created a republic. But the concept of citizens voting on decisions came from Greece 2,500 years ago. The tourist said, but Greek democracy failed. American democracy worked. The curator smiled sadly. We're still here. Our democracy evolved into other forms. Failure and evolution aren't the same thing. That stuck with me. America often positions itself as the inventor of concepts that actually came from ancient civilizations, then justifies it by saying they did it better or right. But that's moving the goalposts. Better implementation doesn't equal original. Invention. I watched a cooking show where an American chef claimed that America invented fusion cuisine by mixing different cultural foods together. A Malaysian chef on the panel laughed. Malaysia has been fusion cuisine for centuries. Chinese, Indian, Malay, all mixed together. Same with Singapore, Thailand, Peru, Mexico. Fusion isn't new. It's how food works when cultures meet. The American chef looked embarrassed. I guess I meant modern fusion in fancy restaurants. The Malaysian chef nodded. That's fair. You marketed it as high-end dining. But the concept is ancient. Marketing genius, not invention. That's the pattern. My colleague in Tokyo told me about an American exchange student who was surprised to learn that instant ramen was invented in Japan. I thought it was American because it's so popular in America. The student wasn't being arrogant. She just assumed that because something was everywhere in America, it must have come from America. That assumption reveals how powerful American marketing and distribution became. When you can make something so successful in your country that people forget where it came from, that's its own form of dominance. But it's not invention. And that distinction matters when you're trying to understand how the world actually works. I was giving a talk at a library in Toronto when an American attendee asked me why. Europeans seem obsessed with correcting Americans about history. I told him it's not obsession. It's correction of misinformation. When someone tells you the pizza you've been making for 200 years was actually invented somewhere else, you're going to speak up. He thought about that. But why does it matter who invented something? Why can't we just enjoy it? I explained that it matters because history matters. When one country erases the contributions of others, it distorts how we understand innovation, culture, and human progress. It also disrespects the people who actually did the work. A teacher from Texas told me that American textbooks often present inventions in a way that emphasizes American exceptionalism. The light bulb section talks about Edison, with maybe one sentence mentioning that others were working on similar ideas. But it doesn't give equal weight to Joseph Swan in England, who was developing incandescent bulbs at the same time. It doesn't explain that Edison's genius was in creating a complete system, the bulb plus the power distribution, not just the bulb itself. Students come away thinking Edison invented electric light, period. That's not quite true. She told me that when she tried to teach a more nuanced version, parents complained. They said she was being anti-American by not giving Edison full credit. But she wasn't taking anything away from Edison. She was adding context. Edison was brilliant, but he was one of many brilliant people solving the same problem at the same time in different places. That's how innovation actually works. I met an American study abroad student in Barcelona who was taking a European history class. She told me it was shocking to learn how much history happened outside America. In high school, we learned American history and then little bits about World War II and ancient civilizations. That's it. I didn't know Spain had a golden age, or that the Netherlands was once a global superpower, or that Portugal explored the world before England did. She wasn't complaining. She was excited to learn, but she was also frustrated that she'd gone 18 years without knowing any of this. That's the education gap. American schools teach American history in depth and world history as footnotes. Other countries do the opposite. They teach world history with their own nation as one chapter among many. Neither approach is perfect, but the American approach creates a generation that genuinely doesn't know what happened outside their borders. A professor from Montreal told me about teaching American students in a Canadian university. Many of them were surprised to learn that Canada burned down the White House in 1814. We learned that the British did that. He explained that Canada was a British colony at the time, so technically both are true. But the soldiers who marched on Washington came from Canada. The students were fascinated. One of them said, "Why didn't we learn this?" The professor shrugged. Because losing a war isn't usually emphasized in national narratives. That's the core issue. Every country teaches history in a way that makes them look good. America just does it with more reach and influence. So when Americans travel abroad with their version of history, it clashes with everyone else's version. I was at a conference in Dublin when an American academic presented research on Irish immigration to America. An Irish historian asked why the presentation didn't mention the British role in the famine that drove immigration. The American academic said, "That's not relevant to American history." The Irish historian disagreed. "It's entirely relevant. You can't understand why Irish people came to America without understanding what they were fleeing." The American thought about that and admitted she'd never considered it from that angle. Her research was about what happened after the Irish arrived in America, not why they left Ireland. Both perspectives were valid, but one was incomplete without the other. A friend who works in publishing told me that American history textbooks are written by committee, with input from state boards that have political agendas. Some states want more emphasis on American exceptionalism. Others want more inclusion of diverse perspectives. The result is textbooks that try to please everyone and end up with a watered-down version of events that emphasizes American achievement without much global context. She showed me 2 textbooks, one from America, one from Britain. The American book had 3 pages on the American Revolution from the American perspective. The British book had 1 paragraph on the American Revolution as part of a larger section on the decline of the British Empire. Both were accurate, but they told completely different stories. American students learned that the Revolution was the most important event in history. British students learned it was one of many colonial rebellions that reshaped the empire. Both are true from their own perspective. An American journalist told me she didn't learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre until she was in her 30s. It wasn't in any textbook I had. I found out from a documentary. She started investigating why it was left out and discovered that uncomfortable parts of American history are often minimized or omitted entirely. If negative events are downplayed, it makes sense that positive events are amplified, sometimes beyond accuracy. This creates Americans who travel abroad genuinely believing their version of history is the only version. They're not being arrogant. They're repeating what they learned. And when confronted with different information, many of them assume the other person is wrong because why would their education system lie to them? It wouldn't, but it would simplify, emphasize certain narratives, and skip over inconvenient details. Every country does this. America's version just became the most visible globally because of Hollywood, the internet, and cultural dominance. I was having coffee with an American friend in Vienna when she said something that summarized everything perfectly. "I think Americans believe we invented everything because we made everything famous. That's it. That's the real reason. America didn't invent pizza, but it made pizza a global phenomenon. America didn't invent cars, but it made them affordable for regular people. America didn't invent democracy, but it created a system that inspired dozens of other nations. America didn't invent the internet, but it made it accessible to the world. America didn't invent cinema, but it built Hollywood and made movies the dominant global art form. That's not nothing. Making something successful worldwide is its own kind of genius. The problem is when success gets confused with origin, when marketing dominance gets mistaken for invention, when cultural influence rewrites history. My friend asked me if I thought Americans would ever learn the full story. I told her they already are. Every American who travels abroad and has these conversations learns something new. Every student who takes European history or Asian history expands their perspective. Every time someone Googles "who really invented X" and finds a complex answer, the education gap shrinks a little. The Americans who argue about pizza in Naples or phones in Berlin aren't bad people. They're products of an education system that prioritized national pride over global context. And that's changing, slowly, but it's changing. I met an American teenager in London who told me he'd been Googling everything his history teacher said. I just want to know if there's more to the story. That's the first step. Curiosity, questioning the simple narrative and looking for the complex. Truth, another American, told me that after traveling through Europe, she felt like she'd been lied to her whole life. I told her that's too harsh. She wasn't lied to. She was given an incomplete story. Now she has the chance to learn the rest of it. That's what this is really about. Not proving Americans wrong, but filling in the gaps. Not taking away American achievements, but adding global context. Not diminishing American contributions, but recognizing that innovation has always been a global effort. With people from every continent solving problems, creating art, and building the world we all share. The Americans who get defensive when corrected are protecting their sense of national identity. The Americans who get curious when corrected are opening themselves up to a bigger, more interesting story. And that story is this: humanity invented everything together. One breakthrough building on another, across borders and centuries, with credit belonging to all of us. This isn't just content, it's perspective. And if that matters to you, you're in the right place. America just happened to be really good at marketing.